Hello everyone. Today we're going to present a comparative study of NAFTA and USMCA. So, let's begin. The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, was signed to replace the 1994 North American Free Trade Agreement in late 2018. This research analyzes the trade flow between these three economies from 1990 to 2020 and compares the major differences between the old and new trade agreement. The USMCA was the first major agreement negotiated under the Trump administration to pressure Mexico and Canada to accept new economic measures and tariffs for trade and intellectual property rights, mostly favorable to the U.S. interests. The content of this presentation: Number 1, North America data. 2, purpose and objectives of NAFTA and USMCA. 3, the influence of these agreements and the overall trade balance between these countries. And 4, criticisms of these trade agreements. So, to make more dynamic this presentation, I'm going to present number 1 and number 2, and Luis is going to present point number 3 and 4. North America data. If we make a comparison between these three countries, Mexico, Canada, and the US, we will find interesting data. The three of them are big countries. They have different natural resources, like in Mexico we can find petroleum, silver, copper, gold, lead, zinc, natural gas, and more. In Canada we can find bauxite, iron, nickel, zinc, copper, gold, lead, rare earth elements, as well as in the US we can find those elements too. We can also find coal, copper, lead, uranium, mercury, silver, petroleum. In terms of GDP, Mexico is a 2.463 trillion economy. Canada is 1.774 trillion. The US 19.49 trillion. In terms of exports, the most important partner for Mexico is the US by almost 80%. For Canada is the US by 76%. And China 4.3%. For the US is Canada by 18%, Mexico 15%, China 8%, Japan 4%. In terms of imports, also the US is a very important partner for Mexico. It represents 46%, China 17%, Japan 4%. For Canada is the US, China, and Mexico. And in the US, in terms of imports, are China by 21%, Mexico, Canada, Japan, and Germany by 5%. In terms of population, we have in Mexico 128.6 million, Canada 37.7 million, and in the US is 332.6 million. So now let's talk about the purpose and objectives of NAFTA and USMCA. What is the North American Free Trade Agreement? In January 1994, the United States, Mexico, and Canada entered into the North American Free Trade Agreement, known as NAFTA, creating the largest free trade area and richest market in the world. The NAFTA is the most comprehensive regional trade agreement ever negotiated by the United States. In 1996, U.S. two-way trading goods under the NAFTA with Canada and Mexico stood at $420 billion, a 44% increase since the NAFTA was signed. It was a controversial trade that gradually eliminated most tariffs and other trade barriers on products and services. From left, you can see the Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari, U.S. President George H.W. Bush, and Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney meeting to the initial North American Free Trade Agreement in San Antonio, Texas, October 7, 1992. What are some of the key goals of the NAFTA? To reduce barriers to trade, to increase cooperation for improving working conditions in North America, to create an expanded and safe market for goods and services produced in North America, to establish clear and mutually advantageous trade rules, and to help develop and expand world trade and provide a catalyst to broader international cooperation. This is the certificate of origin that you can find in chapter number 6. Canada, Mexico, and the United States establish an uniform certificate of origin to certify that goods imported into their territories qualify for the preferential tariff treatment accorded by the NAFTA. A uniform certificate is used in all the three countries and it can be used in English, French, or Spanish. Provisions. NAFTA's main provisions call for the gradual reduction of tariffs, customs duties, and other trade barriers between the three members, with some tariffs being removed immediately and or over periods of as long as 15 years. The agreement ensures eventual duty-free access for a vast range of manufactured goods and commodities trade between the signatories. NAFTA also contains provisions aimed at securing intellectual property rights. Other provisions are for resolving disputes between investors and participating countries. Among other things, such rules permit corporations or individual investors to sue for compensation any signatory country that violated the rules of the treaty. And four provisions of NAFTA were designed to give the US and Canadian companies greater access to Mexican markets in banking, insurance, advertising, telecommunications, and trucking. The United States is the world's largest and most competitive exporter of agricultural commodities. U.S. consumers are benefiting from more open access to wider sources of supply. U.S. agricultural exports to North America have grown rapidly since the NAFTA went into effect. For the automotive industry is one of the most interesting ones because prior to the NAFTA, U.S. motor vehicle exports to Mexico faced restrictive trade balancing and local content requirements, as well as tariffs of 20%. With the reduction and elimination of these trade barriers, liberalized investment rules and preferential rules of origin, U.S. parts and vehicle manufacturers have become more efficient and competitive in the North American market. In 1996, the U.S. exported 51,000 new cars and 31,500 new trucks to Mexico alone for a value of $1.2 billion. Textiles and apparel. The NAFTA has increased economic activity and enhanced export prospects for textile and apparel producers in the United States. Textile and apparel trade among the three NAFTA partners has nearly doubled since the NAFTA took effect, increasing from $6.4 billion in 1993 to $12.4 billion in 1996. So as you can see, the top 10 most intimate apparel brands in 2019 are Nike, Victoria's Secret, Levi's, Ralph Lauren, Adidas, American Eagle, and more. When the President Donald Trump came into office in January 2017, he determined to scrap U.S. involvement in the TPP and to renegotiate NAFTA, which he frequently characterized as the worst trade deal ever made. In his first week in office, he issued an executive order pulling the United States out of the TPP. Representatives from Canada and Mexico and the United States began renegotiating the agreement in August 2017. However, tensions between Canada and the US after Trump in April 2018 announced imposition of import tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, an action that threatened to start a trade war. And at the end of August 2018, Mexico and the United States announced that they had come to terms on a new trade agreement that preserved much of NAFTA but introduced a number of significant changes. The pact was signed by Trump, Trudeau, and the Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto on November 30, 2018. In the summary of objectives for the NAFTA renegotiation of November 2017, we can see that in trading goods, one of them is improve the U.S. trade balance and reduce the trade deficit within NAFTA countries, increase transparency in import and export licensing procedures, discipline import and export monopolies to prevent trade distortions. In industrial goods also we can find maintain existing reciprocal duty-free market access for industrial goods and strengthen disciplines to address non-tariff barriers that constrain U.S. exports to NAFTA countries. USMCA includes country origin rules. Automobiles must have 75% of their components manufactured in Mexico, the US, or Canada to qualify for zero tariffs. Labor provisions. 40 to 45% of automobile parts must be made by workers who earn at least 16 an hour by 2023. Mexico agreed to pass new labor laws to give greater protections to workers, including migrants and women. U.S. farmers get more access to Canadian dairy market. And for intellectual property and digital trade, the bill extends the terms of copyright to 70 years beyond the life of the author, up from 50. And sunset clause, the agreement adds a 16-year sunset clause, meaning the terms of the agreement expire or sunset after 16 years. The deal is also subject to a review every 6 years, at which point the US, Mexico, and Canada can decide to extend the USMCA. And now for the next part, the influence of these agreements and the overall trade balance between these countries.